Give your full name. I need your family name and given name. State your name. Your name, first, middle, and last, please. Give the name on your alien registration card. What is the name listed on your green card? I need the name shown on your alien card. On your alien registration card, what is the name that appears? Give your alien registration number. What is the number on your green card? I need your alien number, please. Can you state your alien registration number? Give me your social security number, now. What's your social? Give your social security number. Tell me your social security number, please. Previous names? What other names have you had? Have you had other names? Can you list any names you've had before, if any? Give your maiden name. Maiden name, please. What was your unmarried name? Can you give me your unmarried name? State your date of birth. Date of birth, month, day, and year, please. When were you born? Tell me the date of your birth. In what place were you born? So, where are you from? What place? Give your place of origin. Where were you born? Give the city or town of your birth. You were born in what city or town? What city or town are you from? State your city or town of origin. Give the country where you were born. What country are you from originally? You were born in what country? What is your country of birth? Was either of your parents naturalized here in the USA? I need to know if your mother or father was ever a US citizen. Can you tell me if any of your parents were citizens of the US? Was either of your parents US citizens? Can you read and write fully in English? Is it safe to assume that you can read and write in English? Do you read and write English? Are you able to read and write in English? Can you speak English? Can you talk to me in English? Do you speak any English? Can you communicate in English orally? Please, sign in English. Are you able to sign your name in English? In English, please, sign your name. Give your signature in English. What is your date of admission to become a permanent resident? State the date of admission for permanent residency. When were you admitted for permanent residency? When did you get admitted for your permanent residential status? What is the time frame of your continuous residency in this country? How long have you lived here? For how long have you resided in the U.S.? How long have you resided here continually? Do you plan to live in the U.S. permanently? Are you going to reside in the United States indefinitely? You will be residing permanently in this country? Do you have intentions of residing here on a permanent basis? Were you ever a member of the United States Armed Forces, military? Have you or have you not served in this country's armed forces, military? Have you served in the armed forces, military of the United States? Did you ever serve in the armed forces of the United States? List the addresses where you've resided for the last 5 years. During the last 5 years, what addresses have you had? Where have you lived for the last 5 years? Where have you resided during the last 5 years? Currently, where do you live? Presently, you live at? What is your address right now? What is your address at the present time? List places of employment for the last 5 years. What jobs have you had in the last 5 years? For the last 5 years, where have you worked? For the last 5 years, where were you employed? What employment do you have right now? Where do you work now? What job do you have right now? Who is your employer at the moment? Can you tell me where you work? At what place do you work? Where is your job? Where are you employed? For 6 months or less, have you been absent from the U.S.? Did you leave the country for less than 6 months? Were you outside U.S. territory for exactly 6 months or less? Have you left the U.S. for a time span of 6 months or less? For a period of 6 months or more, have you been absent from the U.S.? Did you leave the country for more than 6 months? Were you outside U.S. borders for exactly 6 months or more than 6 months? Have you left the U.S. for a time span of 6 months or more? Can you explain your absences? Why did you leave the country? Give reasons for your absences. What are the reasons for your absences? What is your marital status at the present time? What is your marital status, right now? Tell me your marital status at the moment. Presently, what marital status do you hold? Can you tell me if you are married? You are married, correct? You are married at this time? Are you married? Can you tell me if you're widowed? Are you widowed? Are you widowed right now? At this time, are you widowed? Can you tell me if you are divorced? Are you divorced? Are you divorced now? Presently, are you divorced? Can you tell me if you are single? You are single, correct? Are you single right now? Are you single at this time? Can I have the first name of your husband, wife? What is your husband's or wife's first name? Give your spouse's first name. What is the first name of your spouse? Where did your marriage take place? Where did you get married? What is the place where you wed? Where were you wed? What is the birth date of your spouse? What is your spouse's birth date? What is the date of birth of your husband, wife? What is the date of birth of your spouse? When was your husband, wife born? What is your spouse's country of origin? Where is your husband, wife from originally? Where was your spouse born? What is the country where your spouse was born? Where did your spouse enter this country? Where did your husband, wife enter the U.S.? Where did your spouse enter the U.S.? What place marked the entrance to the U.S. for your spouse? Can you supply the date of entry to the U.S. for your spouse? Give me the date of entrance to the U.S. for your spouse. When did your spouse enter the U.S.? What was the date in which your husband, wife entered this country? Can you give me the alien number for your spouse? Do you know your spouse's alien number? What is your spouse's alien number? Do you recall your husband's or wife's alien number? Give the current immigration status for your husband, wife. What is your spouse's status, as an immigrant, right now? What is the present immigration status of your spouse? Can you cite the immigration status of your spouse now? Do you know if your spouse is a citizen in this country? Here in the United States, is your spouse a citizen? Is your husband, wife a U.S. citizen? Is your spouse a citizen of the U.S.? When did your husband, wife become a United States citizen? When did your husband, wife become naturalized? With regard to U.S. citizenship, when did your spouse obtain it? What is the date on which your spouse became naturalized? Give the city or country where your husband, wife was naturalized. Your spouse's naturalization took place in what city or country? What is the city or country where your spouse became naturalized? In what city or country did your spouse obtain citizenship? Did you ever marry before? Have you been married before? Have there been any other marriages in the past? Were you married prior to your current status? Give me the name of your previous spouse. What was the name of your other husband, wife? What was the name of your spouse? Could you state the name of your previous spouse? Give the date of your previous marriage. When were you previously married? When did your earlier marriage occur? On what date did your previous marriage take place? On what date did that marriage officially end? When did you finally divorce? When did you divorce? When was your divorce finalized? Was your present spouse married before? Was your husband, wife married before? Has your present spouse been married before? How many times did your husband, wife marry before? What is the number of times your spouse married before? Do you have any children? Have you got kids? Do you have kids? Are there any children of your own? Your children have what names? What are the names of your kids? What are the kids' names? What are the children's names? Give each child's date of birth. What was each child's date of birth? On what date was each child born? When was each of your children born? Each child was born in what country? In what place was each child born? Where was each child born? What was the place of birth for each child? What is the entry date into this country for each child? Give me each child's entry date into the U.S. What is the entry date for each of your children into the U.S.? What is the date of entry to the U.S. for each child? Give the alien registration numbers for each of your children. What are your children's green card numbers? What is the alien number for each of your children? What is the alien registration number for each child? Are you considered nobility in a foreign country? Did you ever have a title of nobility? Do you have a title of nobility from any foreign country? Were you born with a title of nobility or did you acquire one in any foreign country? Have you been found legally incompetent? Did you ever get labeled legally incompetent? Are you legally incompetent? Were you ever declared legally incompetent? Were you ever isolated as a patient in a mental institution? Were you ever a patient in an institution for the mentally ill? Were you ever secluded in an institution for mental patients? Was there ever an instance when you were confined in a mental institution? In the U.S. or elsewhere, are you affiliated with any organization, party, or club? Are you affiliated with any group in the U.S. or outside of it? Do you have any affiliations with any group in the U.S. or in any other place? Are you affiliated with any organization anywhere in the world? Have you had any kind of relation with the Communist Party wherever you have been? Have you had anything to do with the Communist Party here or anywhere else? While being in the U.S. or in any other place, have you been involved with the Communist Party? Did you associate with the Communist Party while in the U.S. or in any other place? Tell me whether you are a communist or not. Are you a communist? Do you belong to the Communist Party? Are you a member of the Communist Party? Can you state whether or not you've had associations with the Nazi government of Germany? Have you had any association with the Nazi government of Germany? Did you have any involvement with the Nazis in Germany? Did you partake in association with the German Nazis? Did you ever participate in any way in the persecution of a person from 1933 to 1945? Have you persecuted any person for whatever reason? Between 1933 and 1945, did you participate in any form of persecution? Did you partake in active persecution toward any person between 1933 and 1945? Are you mentally ill, presently? Have you got a mental illness? Do you suffer from mental illness? Is mental illness one of your ailment? Did you ever commit any crimes? Are you guilty of committing any crime? Were any crimes ever committed by you? Have you ever engaged in any crime? Have you been arrested? Did you ever get arrested? Do you have an arrest record here? Have you ever been arrested? While you were outside U.S. territory, did you ever get arrested? Did you ever get arrested outside the U.S.? Were you ever arrested outside this country? Were you arrested anywhere outside the United States? When we talk about good moral character, can we assume you are a person of this caliber? Would you say you are someone of good moral character? Are you a person of good moral character? Can you be considered a person of good moral character? Is polygamy something you practice? Are you polygamous? Do you engage in polygamy? Do you partake in polygamy? Do you have multiple spouses? Do you have more than one wife or husband? Do you have two or more spouses at once? Are you married to more than one person at the same time? Did you ever work as a prostitute? Were you ever a prostitute? Have you worked as a prostitute? Have you ever engaged in prostitution? Did you contribute to any alien's illegal entrance? Have you helped anyone enter the U.S. illegally? Did you ever help an alien enter the country illegally? Did you make illegal entries possible for aliens? Have you been a trafficker of narcotics or marijuana? Did you ever traffic in narcotic drugs or marijuana? Are you an illicit drug trafficker? Did you ever take part in drug trafficking? Has the bulk of your income been due to illegal gambling? Did you make most of your money by gambling illegally? Has illegal gambling been your greatest source of income? Did illegal gambling become your primary source of income? Is there an order for deportation that awaits you? Are there any deportation proceedings pending against you? Are you waiting for deportation proceedings to become final? Do deportation proceedings pend on your behalf? Did you ever get deported? Were you deported? Have you been ordered deported? Was deportation or an order for deportation ever imposed on you? Did you ever complete a suspension of deportation application? Did you apply so that deportation in your case would be suspended? Have you submitted an application for suspension of deportation? Did you ever apply so that your order for deportation would be suspended? On what date did you file income taxes? Your last income tax return was filed on what date? When did you file your last income tax return? What is the date in which you filed your most recent income tax return? As a permanent resident, did you file your income taxes stating you were a non-resident? Did you file your taxes as if you were not a resident, when in reality you were? Did you file your income tax return as a non-resident while you were a permanent resident? Did you ever file an income tax return as a non-resident while being a permanent resident? While being a permanent resident, did you ever fail to file your income tax return? Did you ever decide to ignore your income tax return? Did you ever not file income taxes? Have you ever failed to file your income tax return while being a permanent resident? Did you ever claim, by any means, to be a U.S. citizen? Have you ever claimed to be a citizen of the United States? Did you ever make false claims about your U.S. citizenship? Have you lied or given false testimony regarding your immigration status? Are you a deserter of the armed forces in this country? Have you ever deserted our armed forces? Have you deserted from the United States Armed Forces? Did you ever desert from the military, air, or naval forces here? In order to avoid being drafted, did you ever leave the country? Did you leave the country in order to escape a draft? Did you exit the United States in order to avoid a draft? Have you fled the country in hopes of avoiding a draft into the United States Armed Forces? Do the Constitution and form of government of the U.S. follow your convictions? Do you believe in our Constitution and form of government? Are your beliefs in support of the U.S. Constitution and form of government? Are the U.S. Constitution and form of government in accordance with your belief? Are you willing to take the complete oath of allegiance to the U.S.? Do you want to take the full oath of allegiance to the U.S.? Will you take the full oath of allegiance to the United States? Are you willingly going to take the complete oath of allegiance to our country? On behalf of the U.S., would you bear arms? Would you bear arms for our country? Are you willing to bear arms on behalf of our country, if required by the law? If the law requires that you do so, will you bear arms on behalf of our country? Would you be willing to perform non-combative services in the armed forces if required by law? Would you perform non-combative services in the armed forces, if the law said you must? Are you willing to perform peaceful services in the armed forces, if the law requires you to do so? If the law says you must, would you engage in peaceful services in the armed forces of the U.S.? Under civilian direction, would you be willing to perform work of national importance? Will you perform work under civilian direction, for our country? Are you willing to perform work for this country under civilian direction? Are you willing to perform work for national importance under the direction of a civilian? Have you ever applied in order to be excused from the military? Did you apply for exclusion from the military? Did you ever apply for exemption from military service for any reason? Have you filled out an application in order to be exempt from military service in our country? Is registration for U.S. Selective Service something that you've done? Did you register for the U.S. Selective Service? Have you registered under the Selective Service Law or Draft Law of the United States? With regard to the U.S. Selective Service Law or Draft Law, did you ever complete registration? Is your name something you want to change? Do you want your name changed? Will you be changing your name now? Would you want to change your name?